A few days after the United States published its new national security strategy, a delegation from Poland's National Security Bureau discussed it in Washington at the invitation of the US National Security Council.
Te rozmowy miały bardzo duże znaczenie, bo chodziło nam o to, abyśmy dopytali o pewne rzeczy, abyśmy lepiej zrozumieli akcenty.
These talks are very important because we wanted to ask about certain things in order to better understand the priorities that the Americans are currently focusing on in the world. We also wanted to ensure that we, as a country that is a strategic partner of the United States, could better draft our own strategic documents, in which we must certainly refer to how our strategic ally perceives threats and opportunities in the modern world. In the new American strategy, Poland has taken a special place among the United States' strategic allies in Europe.
Jesteśmy pierwszą delegacją europejską, która ma okazję porozmawiać o szczegółach, intencjach, które stoją.
We are the first European delegation to have the opportunity to discuss the details and intentions behind this document. These were very good talks, which show that the Americans are open to discussions and to expanding security cooperation with Poland on a bilateral basis.
W zasadach bilateralnych.
In accordance with the arrangements made during President Karol Nawrocki's visit to Washington in September, the details of the Polish-American cooperation on defense and the American presence in Poland are being negotiated by the head of the National Security Bureau, Sławomir Cęckiewicz. The Polish equivalent of the US National Security Advisor, whose function in Washington is performed by US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The National Security Bureau refrains from joining the immediate chorus of critics of the national security strategy. Instead, we see in it many areas where Poland finds opportunities to strengthen its position as a key US ally in the region.
W tej chwili na polskiej ziemi stacjonuje około 10 tysięcy żołnierzy US Army. To jest efekt.
At the moment, there are about 10,000 US Army soldiers stationed on Polish soil, and this is the result of the excellent relations between Poland's right-wing camp and every US administration. And we could use this new strategy, this redefinition of US actions on the international stage, to further increase the number of American soldiers in Poland. Because according to the new American strategy, Poland has a special role to play in Europe.
Decydują się na to, żeby Polska.
They have decided that Poland should be, so to speak, the military leader of the region due to its location, strong national identity, and demographic and military potential.
Donald Trump szuka silnego, suwerennego, potrafiącego.
Donald Trump is looking for a strong sovereign partner in Europe that is capable of looking after its own interests, and Poland could be such a partner. This is what Law and Justice was striving for when they were in power, rapidly increasing budgetary expenditure on the development of the armed forces, increasing the size of the Polish army, and developing and creating new units so that Poland can take care of its own security independently. But Prime Minister Donald Tusk, shortly after the publication of the new American strategy, decided to point out the new opportunity for his country in a rather peculiar way. Dear American friends, Europe is your closest ally, not your problem. And we have common enemies. At least that's how it has been for the last 80 years. We need to stick to this. This is the only reasonable strategy for our common security, unless something has changed. Donald Tusk's problem is that when it comes to relations with Donald Trump's administration, he and his foreign minister, Radosław Sikorski, have closed the door on themselves. This was evident in September when the current foreign minister could only take a selfie outside in front of the White House.
Donald
Tusk led an anti-American rebellion in Europe in order to curry favor with the leaders of the so-called old Union countries. The consequences of this behavior is that he has frayed relations with Washington, and in the European Union he is disregarded, ignored, and not invited to the most important meetings. The problem is that Tusk and his government is looking for its primary strategic ally not in America, but in Berlin. Talks are taking place at the level of the National Security Bureau, and it is very good from the point of view of our country's interests that such talks are taking place. It is very bad that the government is not even trying to do something like this. And what is the government doing today? It is involved in preparations for the defense agreement between Warsaw and Berlin, which was recently announced by Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Among other things, the deputy defense ministers of Poland and Germany met today in Malbork to discuss them. We are currently working on a new document on cooperation in the field of defense, which we want to submit in June next year on the 35th anniversary of the Polish-German Treaty. On this occasion, it was possible to learn about new arrangements concerning Polish-German military cooperation. In Malbork, we welcome Eurofighter jets, and on the same day, today, we say goodbye to German Patriot air defense systems, which have been guarding southeastern Poland for a year. This shows how serious Germany's contribution to the defense of the eastern flank is.
Parafrazując antyczne porzekadło, boję się Niemców nawet jak przynoszą
To paraphrase an ancient saying, I fear the Germans even when they bring gifts, because these gifts usually have serious consequences for Poland. That's the first thing. Secondly, Donald Tusk is simply being used by Germany as an anti-American lackey, exploiting his personal aversion to President Trump. So far, the only effect of the Polish Prime Minister's policy has been the increasing marginalization of Poland in European politics.
Próba takiego bardzo nieudolnego i sztywackiego rozgrywania.
This attempt at a very inept, schoolboyish game of playing countries off against each other, in this case playing off the United States against the other countries of the European Union and Germany, as Donald Tusk dreams of doing, is simply dangerous. The game is about increasing the number of American soldiers on Polish soil.
Polska powinna jasno się opowiedzieć, kto jest jej głównym sojusznikiem.
Poland should clearly state who its main ally is and whose help it wants to count on in the event of Russian aggression. It is clear that at the moment it is mainly soldiers from the United States who are stationed here, so the choice should be obvious to everyone.
My musimy o to dbać i pielęgnować, nie oglądać się na Francuzów, nie oglądać się na Niemców.
We should not look to the French or Germans, but do our own thing and strengthen transatlantic relations and cooperation between Warsaw and Washington. The talks of the National Security Bureau's delegation in Washington also covered the G20 summit, to which the American president invited Poland in September.
Mówiliśmy o szczycie G20 w dniach...
We talked about the G20 summit. On the 15th and 16th, Minister Przydacz will be here in Washington. This is important because he will play a significant role in the preparations for next year's G20 summit. He will be representing President Nawrocki. Poland still does not have an ambassador in Washington. Fortunately, President Karol Nawrocki's closest circle is taking care of Polish-American diplomacy. Elections in Ukraine may take place within 3 months. This declaration was made by President Volodymyr Zelensky in response to accusations from Washington that he was stubbornly sticking to his position as president. However, there is a catch. The Ukrainian president wants guarantees of security and a cessation of hostilities during the voting. Negotiations on a peace plan are still continuing in the background. The final, revised version is to be received by the Americans from Kiev and then forwarded to Moscow. Evacuation. This word is repeated almost daily along the entire length of the front line in Donbass. People still live here, just 10 kilometers from the front line. Despite constant bombing and drone attacks, they do not want to leave. No, I won't go now. Maybe another time, but not now. There may not be another time. Volunteers who travel from village to village, from house to house, can do nothing more in such situations. The defense retreats from a few to a few dozen meters every day. What is happening to the city? It is gradually being occupied. There are fewer and fewer intact houses. Fewer and fewer people are staying. There is more and more destruction. Every day there are more and more attacks, both from drones and artillery. There is currently no prospect of turning the tide on this section of the front. Ukraine does not have the forces that will be able to not only put up effective resistance, but also push back the Russians. There is increasing talk in government circles of a general mobilization in the event of a failure of peace negotiations. This is to be the last line of defense.
It's not easy with Russia because Russia has the upper hand, and they always did. They're much bigger. They're much stronger in that sense. I give Ukraine I give the people of Ukraine and the military of Ukraine tremendous credit for the, bravery and for the fighting and all of that. But, at some point, size will win generally.
In a recent interview, the US president also spoke about the need to hold elections in Ukraine that would answer questions about President Zelensky's democratic mandate. He responded unambiguously, organizing elections is not a problem, but the West must guarantee their security. I declare openly that if the United States of America, together with my European colleagues, helps me to ensure the security of the elections, Ukraine will be ready to hold elections within the next 60 to 90 days. And I personally have the will and readiness to hold them. Then, in order for this to succeed, I ask the members of our party, and in fact our parliamentarians, to prepare draft laws on the possibility of changing the legal basis and electoral law under martial law. Ukrainians themselves are very skeptical about the possibility of organizing elections. First of all, there is the issue of logistics in the frontline areas and on the front line itself. Secondly, the Russians will certainly try to disrupt them, even if they declare a ceasefire for that time. When the country is at war, when so many of our men and women are fighting, so many people have left and part of Ukraine's territory is temporarily occupied, elections cannot take place properly. The president of Ukraine is returning to Kiev from a series of meetings in Western Europe. After talks in London, Brussels and the Vatican, the final version of the modified peace plan will go to Washington and from there to Moscow. Given the lack of agreement for the surrender of Ukrainian territory, the Kremlin will almost certainly reject the proposal.
The latest episode of the conflict began with an exchange of fire in the area of a border post. According to Thai authorities, one of their soldiers was killed in the clash. In retaliation, Cambodian positions were shelled, which triggered an avalanche and reignited the smoldering conflict. Thai tanks took part in the attack on some of the Cambodian border posts. At sea, the Navy attempted to cut off enemy units from the main ports in the disputed region. Cambodia is calling for a return to talks and a ceasefire.
We both understand that, and our leader also announced that this is a lose-lose game. So in order to have a win-win, we both nations, you cannot move Cambodia to anywhere, you cannot move Thailand to anywhere. So we better come to a consensus where the point is reached. So that's why saving life is the most important.
On the other hand, the Thais accuse their neighbors of bombing hospitals and announce they will not back down until Cambodia withdraws its troops deep into its territory. At the same time, they have already announced they will not bow to the threat of international sanctions.
We don't think tariffs should be used to pressure Thailand to get back to the joint declaration, to get back to a dialogue process. No. I think the situation regarding Thailand and Cambodia has to be resolved on the basis of its own dynamics. And tariffs, they're part of the trade negotiations. It should be confined to trade negotiations.
Pope Leo XIV commented on the resumption of the conflict. I am deeply saddened by the news of the resumption of the conflict on the border between Thailand and Cambodia. There have been casualties, including civilians, and thousands of people have been forced to leave their homes. I express my closeness in prayer to these dear people and ask the parties to immediately cease fire and resume dialogue. U.S. President Donald Trump plans to intervene quickly in this matter.
In 10 months, I ended 8 wars, including Kosovo, Serbia, Pakistan and India. They were going at it. Israel and Iran, Egypt and Ethiopia. You didn't know about that. Armenia and Azerbaijan. And I hate to say this, one named Cambodia, Thailand, and it started up today. Tomorrow I'll have to make a phone call, and I think they'll get it. Who else could say, I'm going to make a phone call and stop a war of 2 very powerful countries?
In October, in Malaysia, President Trump brokered an agreement after years of clashes between the countries. 2 weeks later, both Thailand and Cambodia began accusing each other of violating the terms of the agreement.